I always thought that if my world ever collapsed, it would happen in a single, dramatic moment, like in the movies. A screaming fight, a slammed door, a rainstorm mirroring my tears. But real betrayal, it doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in, piece by piece, until you're drowning before you even realize you're underwater. I had suspected something was off for weeks. A change in his tone, the way he started holding his phone a little too close, a little too often. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Adam was busy. Work was stressful. I was just being paranoid, right? I should have known something was wrong the moment Adam started acting too nice. Not the usual, "I got you flowers because I love you" kind of nice. More like the "I'm hiding something, and I hope you don't notice" kind. It started with small things. His phone, which was usually left face up on the kitchen counter, was now always tucked into his pocket. He started staying late at work more often, brushing it off with some vague excuse about deadlines. And then there was the cologne. Adam had never cared much about scents, but suddenly he smelled different, like he was trying too hard. "Long day?" I asked one evening when he finally came home. "Yeah," he sighed, kissing my forehead. "You wouldn't believe how much work is piling up." I nodded, pretending to believe him, but my gut was screaming something else. Then came the message. I was doing laundry when I heard his phone vibrate on the nightstand. Out of habit, I glanced at the screen. One unread message. The preview showed just a few words. "I can't stop thinking about last night." My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. I picked up the phone, my heart hammering. But before I could unlock it, the screen went dark. I put the phone back exactly as it was, then walked out of the bedroom as if nothing had happened. My mind raced. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe. No, I wasn't the paranoid type. If my gut was telling me something, there was a reason. I spent the rest of the evening watching him. Every little movement, every word. And suddenly, all those small details, the late nights, the cologne, the way he avoided eye contact, clicked into place. I barely slept that night. By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed proof. So I did what any woman in my position would do. I started digging. The next day, while Adam was in the shower, I grabbed his phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I typed in the passcode, my birthday. It didn't work. Of course. He had changed it. My blood ran cold. He had never changed his passcode before. Never. This wasn't just guilt. This was a cover-up. I put the phone down just as the water turned off. I barely made it back to bed before he walked in, towel around his waist, looking as casual as ever. "Morning, beautiful," he said. I forced a smile. Morning. Inside, I was screaming. I needed a new plan. That night, I pretended to be asleep while he scrolled through his phone. I cracked one eye open, just enough to see the glow of the screen reflecting on his face. I couldn't see what he was reading, but I saw the way his lips curved into a smile I hadn't seen in months. And it wasn't for me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still, to keep breathing evenly. If I confronted him now, he'd just lie. I needed something undeniable, something that would tear apart whatever web of bullshit he was weaving. So the next day, I followed him. I told him I had errands to run, kissed him goodbye like nothing was wrong, then waited for him to leave. 10 minutes later, I was in my car, trailing behind his. He didn't go to work. Instead, he pulled into a parking lot by a small cafe. A woman was already there, waiting for him. She was young, pretty, dressed in a way that made it clear she wanted to be noticed. He got out of the car, walked straight to her, and hugged her. Not the casual, friendly kind of hug, the kind where your hands linger just a little too long. And then he kissed her, right there, in broad daylight, as if I didn't exist, as if everything we had meant nothing. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I should have stormed out of the car, screamed, slapped him across the face. But I didn't, because something told me this wasn't even the worst part. Not yet. I sat there, frozen, watching them. My breath was shallow, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. The logical part of me screamed to get out of the car, to confront him, to make a scene. But another part, the one that had been suspecting this all along, told me to wait, to observe, to gather everything I needed before I made my move. Adam leaned in, whispering something into her ear, and she laughed. A soft, intimate laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from him in months. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few pictures through the windshield. Shaky hands, blurry angles, but enough to prove what was happening. Enough to remind myself I wasn't crazy. They walked inside the cafe together. I clenched my jaw, took a deep breath, and got out of my car. If they thought they could hide, they were wrong. Inside, the cafe was warm, cozy, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and pastries. I spotted them immediately, tucked away in a corner booth. Sitting too close, Adam was leaning forward, his hand resting on hers across the table. The way he looked at her, I knew that look. It used to be mine. I forced myself to stay calm. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they might hear it, but I was past the point of breaking. I walked right up to them. Adam saw me first, his face drained of color, his grip tightening on the coffee cup in front of him. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, voice steady, controlled. "You forgot to tell me about your little breakfast date." The girl, blonde, maybe mid-20s, glanced between us, confusion flickering across her face. Adam stammered, opening his mouth, closing it again like a fish out of water. "Who is she?" the girl finally asked, pulling her hand back from his. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, he didn't tell you. I'm his girlfriend, the one he comes home to, the one he lies to when he says he's working late." Her eyes widened. She looked back at Adam. "You told me you were single." I expected him to deny it, to try and talk his way out of it. But he just sat there, frozen caught. "Unbelievable," she muttered, grabbing her purse and standing up. "You're a piece of shit, Adam." Then she turned to me. I didn't know. I swear. I believed her, but I didn't care. She wasn't my problem. She stormed out, leaving just the two of us. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Adam exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands over his face. "Look, save it." My voice was cold. "I don't need your excuses. I just needed to see it for myself." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving him sitting there, drowning in his own mess. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. But instead, a strange numbness settled over me. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I drove home in complete silence, my mind an empty void. No music, no screaming, no tears. Just the sound of the road beneath my tires and the distant hum of a world that kept moving while mine was shattering. I had always imagined that if I ever caught Adam cheating, I would explode, yell, break things, make a scene. But instead, all I felt was a dull, hollow ache, like my body was refusing to process the betrayal in full, as if it needed time to let the poison sink in. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the front door, the home we had built together, the place that, until today, had felt safe. Now, it felt like a stage for lies. I finally forced myself inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and walked straight to the bathroom. I turned on the sink, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot, my lips pressed into a tight, pale line. I looked like a woman who had just had her world ripped apart, because I sank onto the floor, knees pulled to my chest, and let the first tear slip, and then another, and another, until the quiet sobs turned into ragged, gasping cries, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. I had given him everything, years of my life, my trust, my love, and for what? A secret rendezvous with some girl who probably didn't even know she was part of his twisted little game. I wanted to hate him, and I did. But more than that, I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I wasn't sure, but at some point, my phone buzzed beside me. Adam. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. He was calling me. I let it ring. Then a message popped up. "We need to talk." I let out a bitter laugh. Of course, we needed to talk. Of course. He had something to say now. When it was too late, I tossed my phone aside and pushed myself up from the floor. No, he didn't get to control this. He didn't get to dictate how I felt or what I did next. I wiped my face, inhaled sharply, and walked out of the bathroom with one thought in my mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. I ignored it at first, burying my face into the pillow, hoping to slip back into the dreamless void I had managed to escape into for a few hours. But the buzzing continued, relentless. I groggily reached for it, squinting at the screen. Adam. Again. I let it ring. A second later, a message popped up. Please just talk to me. I stared at the words, feeling a slow, simmering rage creep into my veins. Talk. Now I wanted to talk. After sneaking around with another woman, after lying to my face for God knows how long, after shattering everything we had, he thought he deserved a conversation. I turned off my phone and threw it onto the bed. I had made up my mind last night. I wasn't going to sit around, waiting for him to explain himself, waiting for him to twist his betrayal into something I was supposed to forgive. No, I had wasted enough time on him. I got up, showered, and forced myself to eat something, even though my stomach was in knots. Then, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop. There was something I needed to do, something I had put off for too long. I opened my email and typed up a resignation letter. Short, direct, no explanation. The moment I hit send, a weight lifted off my chest. I didn't just lose a boyfriend yesterday. I lost any illusion that my life was going the way I wanted it to. Adam and I worked at the same company, different departments, but still close enough that I saw him almost every day. And now, the thought of walking into that office, pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't know exactly what kind of man he was, it made my skin crawl. I didn't care what came next. I'd figure it out. All I knew was that I refused to stay in a place that reminded me of him. I was pouring myself a second cup of coffee when I heard the knock at the door. My stomach twisted. I didn't have to check. I already knew who it was. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, pausing for a second before opening it. Adam stood there, looking like hell. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. His lips parted slightly when he saw me, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak. I crossed my arms. What do you want? His shoulders slumped. I need to explain. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Explain what? That you've been fucking your coworker behind my back? Because I think I got that part. He winced. It wasn't like that. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, then what was it like, Adam? Please enlighten me. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I messed up, okay? You didn't mess up. You made a choice. My voice was sharp, cutting. A choice to lie, to betray me, to sneak around. And don't you dare stand here and act like it was some kind of accident. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. I was going to tell you. I laughed again, louder this time. Right. Sure. That's why you were holding her hand in a coffee shop, like some lovesick teenager. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, looking down at the ground. For the first time, he looked small, weak, and I realized something. I wasn't angry because I still loved him. I was angry because I didn't. Not anymore. The pain, the betrayal, it had already started turning into something else. Something colder. I stepped back, gripping the door. I don't care what you were going to say. I don't care why you did it. All I care about is that I'm done. We're done. Adam's eyes snapped up to mine, panic flickering across his face. Wait. I slammed the door in his face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. For the next few days, the silence between Adam and me was deafening. I kept my phone on silent, my mind focused on the days ahead. Work was a blur, more meetings than I could handle. Too many things to fix at the last minute. But I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about anything but the fact that I was free. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. On the surface, everything seemed fine. I was carrying on like nothing had happened, filling my days with distractions and work. But deep down, I knew I wasn't the same person anymore. The person who used to believe in love, in trust, in the idea that maybe, just maybe, someone could be everything they said they were. I hadn't seen Adam since I slammed the door in his face. He didn't try to reach out again, but a part of me was waiting, wondering if he would come crawling back, apologizing, promising he'd change. But then on the fourth day, he showed up at my office. I was sitting at my desk, tapping away at my keyboard, when I felt a presence standing in the doorway. I looked up. There he was. Adam. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. My first instinct was to tell him to leave, to tell him I didn't want to hear a word out of his mouth. But I didn't. I just stared at him, wondering what kind of person would have the audacity to show up after everything that had happened. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. I didn't answer right away. I just motioned toward the chairs in front of my desk. "Sit." He hesitated for a moment before sitting down, his posture stiff, as if he didn't know what to do with his hands. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but neither of us said a word. Finally, I broke it. "What do you want?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking tired. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? You think?" He flinched, but kept going. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I realized something. I was an idiot. I didn't mean to hurt you. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I want to try, to make it right." I stared at him for a long moment, weighing his words. His eyes were filled with guilt, genuine guilt. But it wasn't enough. "You think a few words will fix this?" I finally asked, voice cold. "You think you can just show up and pretend like nothing happened? Like all the lies, all the secrecy, all the betrayal were just some mistake?" Adam's jaw clenched. "No, but I've been working on myself. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to figure out why I did what I did. I couldn't help it." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Therapy? Is that supposed to make everything better? Make me forget what you did?" He looked down at his hands, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't expect you to forget. I want you to know that I regret it, that I understand what I lost." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The way he said it, like he finally realized he had lost me. But was that enough? "I don't need your regret," I said, my voice firm. I needed your honesty. I needed you to be real with me. Instead, I got lies. And that's something I can't get back." Adam's eyes welled up. "I'm sorry." I felt my heart harden. "Sorry doesn't cut it." I stood up, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. "I don't want to hear it anymore, Adam. I don't want to hear your apologies. I don't want to hear how much you've changed. You had your chance, and you blew it." His face crumpled. "Please, don't do this." But I was already walking toward the door. I opened it and turned to look at him one last time. "Goodbye, Adam." And with that, I closed the door behind me, leaving him standing there. The silence was deafening, but this time, it felt different. It felt like closure. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done, and that was enough. I thought I'd feel something, relief, maybe, or even satisfaction, but I didn't. When I left the office that evening, I felt empty, like something was still missing, something I couldn't place. I'd ended things with Adam. I'd said what needed to be said, and yet, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like an open wound, still raw, still throbbing with everything left unsaid. As the days passed, I threw myself into work, into keeping myself busy. I reconnected with old friends, started picking up hobbies I'd left behind, tried to fill the silence with distractions. But when the night came, when I was finally alone in my apartment, the weight of the past would catch up with me. I missed him, not in the way I wanted to, but in the way you miss something familiar that's been ripped away too suddenly. The way you miss the comfort of knowing what's coming next, even if that thing was a lie. But I wasn't stupid. I wouldn't go back to him, not after everything. I just needed time. Time to untangle the mess of feelings I still had left. One night, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when a new message popped up. "Hey, it's Sarah." I furrowed my brow. I didn't know any Sarah, but as I read the message, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I think you should know something about Adam. My heart skipped a beat. What now? Was this some kind of joke? I quickly typed back, asking who she was, what she meant. Her response came a few minutes later. I work with Adam, and I think it's time you knew the truth. I felt my fingers tremble as I read the message. There's more. He's not just seeing someone else. He's been seeing someone for a long time. I don't know how long exactly, but I'm guessing it's been over a year. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but I thought you deserved to know. The words blurred in front of my eyes. A year? He'd been seeing someone else for a year. I set the phone down, running my hands through my hair. Was I really surprised? Was it even possible to feel more betrayed than I already had? But then the rage hit. It hit harder than before. The anger that had been simmering under the surface suddenly boiled over, and I found myself pacing the living room, clenching my fists, trying to control the storm inside me. How could he do this? How could he not only betray me once, but for an entire year? And why hadn't he told me? Why had he let me keep living in the lie he'd built? My mind raced, but there was no answer. I grabbed my phone again, quickly typing out a message to Sarah. Why are you telling me this? She responded almost immediately. Because you deserve the truth, and I think you should confront him. It's not fair to you. I felt a chill run down my spine. Confront him? Should I? After everything I had already gone through, was I really willing to go through that again? The answer was simple, but painful. I wasn't done with Adam. Not yet. I needed to hear it from him. I needed him to admit what he had done. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't want to go anywhere, see anyone, pretend like I had it all together. I needed to see Adam, and I needed him to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. I had no plan, no idea what I was going to say, but I was done with the guessing game. No more lies, no more pretending. It was time to end it once and for all. I got into my car, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. As I drove to his apartment, I could feel my heart racing in my chest. When I finally pulled up in front of his building, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of everything, the anger, the betrayal, the confusion, felt heavier than it ever had before. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but I knew one thing. I needed answers, and Adam was the only one who could give them to me. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound echoed in the hallway, louder than I expected, and for a moment, I stood there, frozen. What was I doing? Was this really the right choice? But then I shook my head. I couldn't back out now. I needed to know. The door creaked open, and there he was, Adam. His eyes widened when he saw me standing there, and I could tell that he didn't expect this. Didn't expect me to show up at his door again. For a split second, he looked almost relieved, as if he thought I had come back to apologize, to take him back. But when he saw the expression on my face, cold, determined, and utterly serious, his smile faltered. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I pushed past him, stepping into the apartment. It felt strange, being here again, standing in the space where we had once shared so many memories. Now, it just felt like a place full of lies. I turned to face him, my arms crossed over my chest. "I know everything, Adam." His face went pale, and for a moment, I could see the panic in his eyes. But he quickly masked it with a forced calm. "What do you mean, everything?" I took a deep breath, holding his gaze. "The other woman, the one you've been seeing for over a year." He didn't say anything, but I could tell by the look on his face that I was right. I pressed on, my voice rising, filled with the anger I had been holding back for so long. "How long, Adam? How long were you going to keep this from me? How long were you going to lie to my face and tell me that everything was fine?" His shoulders slumped, and he closed his eyes for a moment, like he was trying to find the right words. But there were no right words, no way to make this any better. "Look, I didn't plan for any of this," he said, his voice shaky. "It just happened. I didn't mean for things to go this way." I shook my head. "No, Adam, that's not good enough. You didn't plan for it, but you kept it going. You chose to keep lying. You chose her, and you chose to hurt me. His lips parted like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. I could feel the rage building inside me again. The same anger I had felt when I first found out about the affair. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the realization that I had been living in a fantasy. The man I thought I knew wasn't real. You lied to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You made me feel crazy for questioning you, for thinking that something was off. You had me believe everything was fine. And for what? So you could keep playing this game behind my back. Adam didn't answer. Instead, he just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, as if he were fighting with himself. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on my heel, heading for the door. Where are you going? He asked, his voice desperate now. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I'm going home, Adam, and I'm never coming back. I deserve more than this. I deserve the truth, and I deserve someone who isn't afraid to be honest with me. His voice broke. Please don't leave like this. We can work through this. I turned around to face him, my eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. You don't get to decide what happens between us. You've already made that choice for me. The words hit him like a punch. He stumbled back, looking like I had knocked the wind out of him. And in that moment, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness. I left without another word, closing the door behind me. And as I walked down the hall, I couldn't help but feel like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I wasn't the same person who walked into his apartment. I wasn't the person who had believed in love and second chances. That person was gone. And maybe that was the hardest part. That part of me, the one who was willing to forgive, to forget, was no longer there. I had finally realized that I wasn't the one who needed to change. He was. As I stepped into the elevator, I took one last look at the apartment complex. And as the doors closed, I made a promise to myself. This was the last time I would let someone else's actions control my happiness. I was done with being lied to, done with being hurt. I was moving on. And this time, I was doing it for me. The days that followed were a blur, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't quite keep up with. On the outside, I went through the motions, showing up to work, catching up with friends, pretending like everything was fine. But on the inside, I was a mess. The anger had subsided, but in its place, there was this hollow emptiness, like something was missing, something I would never get back. I kept thinking about that moment, standing in his apartment, hearing him try to justify it all, to explain away the months of betrayal with nothing more than empty words. His face still haunted me, the desperation in his eyes, the hope that maybe, just maybe, I would take him back. But I didn't. I couldn't. But then came the silence, the painful silence of realizing that the person who had once been my everything was now nothing, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to fill the space he had left behind. A week passed, and I hadn't heard from Adam. Part of me thought that maybe I should reach out, maybe see if we could talk. But the thought of going back, of revisiting all of it, made my stomach churn. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Adam. I stared at it for a moment, the phone vibrating in my hand, the tension in my chest rising with each passing second. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to pick up, hear his voice, see if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to fix things. But I knew better. This wasn't something that could be fixed. Not anymore. I let the call go to voicemail. But then came the text. I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, torn between wanting to respond and wanting to ignore him completely. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep letting him drag me back into his world of lies. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed it to myself to hear him out, to hear what he had to say, even if it was nothing more than another excuse. Why? I typed back, my fingers trembling. What could you possibly say that would make any of this better? I hit send, immediately regretting it. But it was too late now. A few moments passed before his reply came through. I owe you more than an explanation. I made a mistake, and I need to fix it. I stared at the message, the words not making sense to me. A mistake? Was he really calling it that? Did he think he could just call it a mistake and expect everything to go back to normal? You can't fix this, Adam. It's done. I hit send before I could stop myself. And this time, I didn't feel regret. I felt something else, relief. For the first time in a week, I felt like I was finally standing my ground. I was done. I wasn't going to be swayed by his words, by his promises that meant nothing anymore. But then came the unexpected. The phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Adam. It was Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, I said, my voice flat. I know this might be the last thing you want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something, she said, her voice urgent, almost frantic. My heart dropped into my stomach. What now? What is it? I asked, bracing myself for whatever she had to say. It's about Adam and the woman he's been seeing. I felt my pulse quicken. What about her? She's not who you think she is, Sarah said. She's not just some random fling. She's someone you know. I could barely breathe. What do you mean? Who is she? There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again, her voice barely audible. It's Rachel, his co-worker, the one you met that day at the party. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Rachel. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The one person I had trusted, the one person I thought was my friend. She was the one Adam had been seeing behind my back. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of it, but it felt like my brain was short-circuiting. How could Rachel do this to me? How could she betray me like this? I didn't want to tell you this, but I couldn't let you stay in the dark, Sarah continued. I just thought you deserved to know the full truth. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could do was stand there in stunned silence. The betrayal was deeper than I ever imagined, and for the first time, I realized something that had been lurking in the back of my mind all along. Adam wasn't the only one who had betrayed me. Rachel had too. I felt the anger rise inside me again, but this time, it was sharper, more focused. I wasn't just done with Adam. I was done with both of them. The anger surged through me like a tidal wave, raw and unrelenting. I wanted to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. The revelation about Rachel had shaken me to the core. My mind raced back to that night. The way she had smiled at me, the way she'd casually chatted about work, about Adam, all while knowing exactly what was happening behind my back. I had trusted her. She was supposed to be my friend, but the betrayal stung even more than Adam's. He was expected to act like this. He had always been unreliable, selfish, and now I saw it. But Rachel, she was different. She had been the one who had listened to my complaints about Adam, the one I had vented to. She had been my confidant. And now, she was sleeping with the one person I thought would never betray me. I walked around my apartment aimlessly, my heart pounding in my chest. What was I supposed to do with this? What was the next step? Confront them? Walk away and pretend I never knew? But how could I forget? How could I erase the image of Rachel's smug face, her calm demeanor while stabbing me in the back? I grabbed my phone, swiping through my contacts until I found Adam's name. His messages still lingered on the screen, each one a reminder of his pitiful attempt at an apology. I had ignored him, and part of me felt good about it. But now, with this new information, I wasn't sure. My mind kept telling me to delete his number, to block him, to cut all ties and move on. But my heart, my damn heart, kept asking why. Why hadn't he been honest with me? Why hadn't he told me about Rachel, about the affair? Before I could think better of it, my finger hovered over his contact name. It felt like an impulse, something I couldn't control. What was I hoping for? Closure? Revenge? Maybe I just needed to hear him say it again. To hear him admit the depth of the lies. I tapped the screen. We need to talk. I typed, my hands trembling slightly as the words appeared on the screen. It didn't take long for the message to be read. I waited, staring at the little bubble that signified he was typing. What's going on? He replied. Are you ready to forgive me? The audacity of him. Forgive you? I typed, my fingers moving faster now. You didn't just betray me, Adam. You betrayed me with Rachel. the one person I trusted the most. I don't think I can ever forgive that. I didn't expect him to respond right away, but he did. I messed up. I know that. I can't take it back, but I want to try to make things right. I stared at his message, my mind whirling with conflicting emotions. A small part of me wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. It was too late for apologies. The damage had already been done. It's over, Adam. I sent. I'm done with you. I sat there for a moment, the words settling in. Part of me felt relief, but it was followed quickly by anger. I wanted to feel victorious, but I didn't. There was no victory in this, just pain. And I realized as I sat there that I wasn't done. Not really, because somewhere deep inside me, I still wanted answers. I still wanted to confront them both and see their faces when they realized what they had done. But then another thought crept in. Maybe I didn't need that. Maybe the real power, the real control, was in walking away and leaving them both behind. Maybe that was the way to finally get closure, by not giving them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. I placed my phone down and took a deep breath. I couldn't let them keep controlling me, keep drawing me back into their toxic mess. It was time to let go, to find peace in the one thing they had tried to strip from me, my sense of self-worth. The phone buzzed again, interrupting my thoughts. This time, it was a text from Rachel. We need to talk. Please don't do anything drastic. Drastic. I almost laughed at the irony of her words. She was the last person who could ask me for that. I looked at the screen for a long time, wondering if I should respond. But deep down, I already knew. There was nothing left to say. They didn't deserve my time, my energy. So, I did the only thing I could do. I erased their messages. Both of them. As I watched the conversations disappear into the ether, a strange sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't final. There would be days where the anger would bubble back up. Days where I would remember the hurt and the betrayal. But for now, in this moment, I was free. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. All I needed was to walk away. I woke up the next morning to silence. The kind of silence that felt too loud. My phone sat on the nightstand, untouched, its screen still showing the erased messages from Adam and Rachel. It had been hours since I'd let them go, but somehow, it felt like nothing had changed. The emptiness that remained was heavier than I expected, and I wasn't sure if it was the weight of the betrayal or the uncertainty of what came next. I didn't want to stay in bed all day, letting my mind spiral. I couldn't. I had to move forward. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I had to find a way to make peace with everything that had happened, even if it didn't make sense, even if I didn't have all the answers. I decided to go for a walk, just to clear my head. The world outside was bustling, the sun bright, and the streets alive with people going about their day. It was strange how life could feel so normal, even when everything inside you was shattered. As I walked, my thoughts kept drifting back to Adam and Rachel. I couldn't help it. But now, with every step I took, I started to realize something. I didn't need their closure to find peace. I didn't need them to acknowledge the damage they'd done. I didn't need them at all. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. The anger would creep back in. The hurt would resurface. But the difference now was that I had a choice. I could choose not to let it control me. I could choose to let go. I found myself walking aimlessly through the city, not really paying attention to where I was going. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to feel something else, anything else, besides the weight of betrayal. I ended up at the little cafe I used to visit on weekends with Adam. It had always been our place, a quiet spot tucked away on a side street, perfect for late mornings and long conversations. The memories hit me as soon as I stepped inside, and I froze for a second. The last time I had been here with him, everything had seemed perfect, but now it felt empty. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching the world go by. The barista gave me a warm smile, but I could tell she recognized something was off. I wasn't the same person who used to come here with Adam, laughing and talking about our plans for the future. I tried to focus on the present, on the small details around me, the steam rising from my coffee, the hum of conversations, the rustle of a newspaper nearby. It was grounding. But my mind kept wandering back to the mess Adam and Rachel had left behind. I wanted to scream at them, to confront them face to face, and demand they explain themselves. But then I remembered how hollow that would feel, how no amount of words would ever erase the betrayal. They could apologize, they could beg for forgiveness, but the damage would remain. The truth was, they were never going to give me what I needed. They were never going to give me the closure I was searching for. And maybe that's the lesson I had to learn. Closure wasn't something anyone else could give me. It was something I had to find within myself. As I sat there, I realized that what I needed wasn't an apology. What I needed was to reclaim my life, to take back control. The pain would fade with time, but I had to make the decision to stop letting it define me. I had to be stronger than my hurt. I took a deep breath and stood up, my fingers curling around the handle of my cup. The decision had been made. It was time to move on. The world outside hadn't changed. People were still rushing around, lost in their own lives. But for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. I could see beyond the betrayal. I could see the possibility of a future where I wasn't chained to the past. As I walked out of the cafe, the weight on my shoulders seemed lighter. I wasn't free yet, not completely, but I was getting there. I was learning to walk away, to let go of the things and people that didn't deserve a place in my life anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking for answers from them. I was finding them within myself.
Thank you very much for watching. Did you like this story? Like, subscribe, and write a comment about your opinion.